Welcome back to the DevReady Podcast. Once again, we've got Dan Mumby. Thanks for returning, Dan. Dan's a 15X founder, known as That Startup Guy, angel investor, and a few other things as well along the lines. Thanks for joining us again, Dan.
Oh, thanks for having me back, Andrew. We had a lot of fun chatting the last time, so glad you could have me back into the studio and just continue the conversation.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of conversations that are on the startup journey and that help me to advise people that have that idea, what do I do next? Now, something we want to talk about today is really about how do I build the right team? Do I get advisors? Do I bring on a tech founder? Do I bring on a CTO? What do I do? So I want to just dive into that a little bit today about finding the right team, building the board, building the advisory board, and just jumping into that a little bit.
Well, it's a great topic because I hear a lot of good advice out there from friends and peers and industry colleagues that I talk to about this, but I also hear a lot of bad misinformation. And the often trotted out, hopefully it's died a horrible death by now, but the hustler, the hacker, and the hipster as the sort of three co-founders.
I heard that a few years back. I haven't heard that much anymore.
Oh, thank God for that. Yeah, I'm hoping it has died now, but if you hear it, run them off when you want to.
And that will tell you run them off.
There you go. There's a sign from above. It's just basically, don't be doing that. So the challenge of do I need a co-founder? Do I need tech co-founders? I think not. But then the question of how do I find those? How do I build a team? It's sort of really related to the conversation about how do I find advisors and how do I find mentors and how do I build an advisory board from advisors, and then how do I build a formal board? I think they're all parts of the same journey because they're all part of what I call your team roadmap.
Okay, so just diving in on that, target market for us is clearly non-techs building tech products. Now, generally, what we've found is they go out and they source techs or developers and start building something.
Yeah.
So you're talking about, the conversation we probably had with you was talking about building the strategic plan. Now this is how do I build a roadmap for a team and think about the business model as well, not just about the tech and the technology I'm delivering.
Absolutely. So we had a lot of fun talking about some of these topics last time. So rather than going over the old ground, one of the things I talk a lot about is if you're painting a wall, you can be the best painter in the world, but if your ladder is on the wrong wall, you aren't going to get paid. Okay? I think there was a ladder on the roof before. It's a hot day in Melbourne and there's a bit of heat going, so we'll forgive the tradesman on the roof. But if he's fixing the wrong air conditioner, he's not going to get paid. So
very true.
That's the analogy. And the problem with going out and hacking together, putting together tech co-founders and hacking together a product is that you don't know if your ladder's on the right wall yet.
Okay.
And there's a very, very high percentage of failure in startup land, in the venture space. And, it's because what you're doing is unknown, it's hard, you've probably never done it before, and there's other competition and there's, limited resources and scarcity of capital, et cetera, et cetera. It takes money to build a brand. It takes money. It takes real money. I mean, anybody who says that they can throw a business together for $50 or $500, well, you can, but you better be prepared to spend $5 or $10 million over the life of that venture and building it into a significant venture, into a brand. Now, it's going to come from capital or revenue. There's only two places you can get it from. So either money that you're making from the customers from product you're selling, or people who invest in your business.
Okay.
In Australia, there's a limited number of investors. And we're quite risk averse in Australia.
We are. It's a very different market than the US, clearly. Very risk averse. They want proven businesses that are generating income. But how do you get to that point?
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things we talked about in the last episode was with a strategic plan. And one of the key elements of that, and we did discuss the funding elements of it and the personal runway capacity. In discussing the team roadmap, it's the same sort of question. You got to think about where is my end game and how do I reverse engineer it back?
Yes.
And so if I've got a business that's generating $20 million in sales a year and making $4 million of profit that I can reinvest and build a large brand and scale, that's great. So if I've got a business that's turning over $20 million, I've probably got 50 employees.
Yeah, you need some numbers there, don't you?
Need some numbers. I mean, you're not going to be turning over $20 million with two people. You're just not. I mean,
Unless you hit it big with some tech that everybody wants, but it's very, very rare and very unlikely.
I mean, was it Snapchat that had 13 employees?
I think it was something around that. Yeah, it's the unicorn, right?
That's
right. Not happening every day.
But unicorns don't exist. I mean, they're a figmentary, imaginary. It's a horse with an ice cream cone stuck on their head.
Pretty much. Yeah.
But the reality of that is, if you're going to have 50 people, then think about that. Well, okay, so I'm going to get to 50. So what about, who are my first 20 employees? Well, who are my first 10 team members? Or who are my first 5 team members?
Yep.
And stage it back those ways. And I always say that the first 5 team members you should get are not employees. They're your advisors.
Okay, interesting. So not employees, advisors.
No, your advisors. And the reason for that is that pretty much in any business, there's about 5 buckets that you'll want to handle. Okay. And I figure if you can get the advisors first, they will know, rather than trying to go out and recruit or hire people in startup land, which is quite hard to do, or spend 12 months networking and meeting all the right people, is if you can find the right advisors and focus your time and efforts there, not only will you get the benefits that we talked about in the previous podcast about the right guidance, helping you ask the right questions, etc.
Okay.
But these guys, if these advisors, I say guys, I mean generically guys and girls, if these advisors have been in their segment or their space for 10 or 20 or 30 years, they're going to have a Rolodex or a LinkedIn profile filled with the right type of people that they can introduce you to. So you're going to very, very quickly be introduced to people that a trusted source is going to say, I like this person, I know them well, I trust them, they're going to be perfect for your business, and I would love to introduce you. And that's
gold. Yeah, it is, because you can be knocking down so many doors and get nowhere if you don't have the right connections. And I've been there before, done it, started up a business in the pharmacy space. I was telling you a little bit about it before.
Yeah.
Bringing on a good advisor and team member into that, the youth industry, has changed the dynamic of that business, and it can completely shift when you have the right people with the right Rolodex, as you call it, or phone with contacts in it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's right. Not everybody knows what a Rolodex is. They're not as old as us, but as experienced and as senior. But the reality is that that everybody you need, every resource that you need for your business, certainly for the first 20 people, is known to someone that you know. But you may not know them, but someone you know knows them.
Okay.
So you firstly got to know how to ask, but you got to know what you're looking for.
Yes.
So the reason why I start with the 5 advisors is I'll give you the 5 buckets. Now I put the math separately to this, and I keep out legal and finance and tax and law and stuff separate, because they're a sort of a separate bucket. You can hire advisors. So let me make the differentiation here. So I'm not talking about guns for hire style advisors in that way. Admittedly, with any advisor, you should value their time and you should recognise the value of their time, and you should find a way to reward them.
Clearly.
But we might get into that in a minute. But I'm just going to talk about the advisors here. So I'm not talking about the service providers that you would go through for technical instruction. I'm talking about what starts off as perhaps mentors and advisors, that sort of informal approach that might become informal advisory board members, that might become a formal advisory board, that might become a formal board. So sort of stages of the approach. So if you've got 50 team members, you're going to have and investors, you're going to have a formal board. If you're a team of 1, you don't need a formal board. And in the same way that you don't need 50-page shareholder agreements, because it's just you. Okay. So what you're looking for is you're looking for 2 criterion. Let's start at the beginning. For a mentor advisor, there's 2 criterion. Number 1, they must be emotionally invested in my success. Okay. And number 2, they must have walked the path before. And I know we covered this in the podcast, but I thought it was important enough to reiterate it.
Yes, okay. So walk the path with 4 and emotionally invested. Now, how do you get a mentor or an advisor emotionally invested?
Well, let me tell you why you want them, and then we'll show you how to find them, because they're actually pretty easy. So the 5,
great.
Yeah, they are. It's actually pretty easy once you know what you're looking for. And this is the key, is that if I'm looking for somebody who has walked the path from me, then that's a really good start. Now, my ability to develop relationships with people will demonstrate over time whether that person is then emotionally invested in my success or not.
Get it.
So that's relationship building 101.
Of course, yeah.
Okay. But they've got to at least have walked the path. So I'm going to start with the right raw materials, let's say.
Yep.
Okay. So the 5 buckets I'm looking for typically, I'm looking for somebody who can help me understand how to deliver my service. Mm-hmm. And that might be in some areas called a technical advisor.
Okay. So how to deliver from a technical capability, how to deliver the products
/ service, whatever the offering is. If I'm setting up a retail store, I want an advisor who understands retail.
Yeah. So,
okay.
Whatever the offer is.
If I'm setting up a pizza shop, if I'm setting up a bookstore, I want somebody that understands that. Okay.
So from who we're talking to, non-techs, we want a technical person that knows how to deliver what you're trying to achieve.
Well, they at least understand the challenges of it, and maybe they're not active as an actual operator anymore, but they're certainly a good advisor, and they understand the technical areas.
So they've been there, done that, and delivered something before and many times throughout their career.
Exactly. Okay. Now, with most industries, there's and certainly with any venture, there's an element of regulatory and compliance elements that you've got to address. Certain industries are a lot more than others, like childcare or fintech or those sorts of areas. There's high levels of compliance, building industry, those sorts of areas. So I want somebody who understands what all the regulatory requirements are, and also who understands the industry and the gorillas. They know where all the bodies are buried. They know who all the players and the operators are. Okay. I want an industry insider in that industry. So, and so if I'm in the telco space, I want somebody who maybe they've worked at a large telco organisation and they're now out on their own. So that would be the second thing I'm looking for. Yep. The third thing I'm looking for is I'm looking for somebody who is absolutely a gun in terms of acquiring customers in the way I'm imagining that we would do that. Now, let me give you a breakdown of what I mean by that. If I'm selling a business-to-business service or product or offering, then I want somebody who understands a B2B enterprise-style sales model. Okay. If I'm doing if the model of acquiring companies is we go and knock on the door, we develop a relationship around a product offering, and it's a long series of conversations, lots of shoe leather in it, then I want somebody who understands that enterprise sales model. Okay. If I'm doing a retail sales play, then I want somebody who understands how to get customers into the store, if you will, the retail play. If I'm doing a digital play, I want somebody who understands how digital conversion works. If I'm doing there's a half a dozen other different sales models.
It's very specific, in terms of what you're looking for, not just a salesperson that's got a track record, but in the same space that you're targeting.
Exactly. So, and I tend to specialise in industrial sales models. For me, that's an easy no-brainer. But there are other areas where I'm a little bit light, so I definitely want an advisor that's going to fill in those gaps and help me ask the right questions where I don't know that I don't know stuff.
Yeah, and that's massively important. Are you asking and exploring the right questions? And that's one thing you don't know if you're not in the industry or you don't have that expertise. So it's pivotal to success, really.
Exactly. And then the other thing is that, and then the last but or the fourth bucket is, which is really important, is I want someone who understands the audience or the market. And I mean the market by the customer market. I don't necessarily mean that. This is sort of like may or may not be the same person who understands the regulatory environment and understands the industry. But it's tell me about the customer. Tell me about what makes them tick. What keeps them awake at night. Where's their pain points? What's the perspective that I need to be trying to figure out? That I need to. We talked about on the last podcast about talking about the audience. Yes. Well, I need to know what questions to ask the audience. I need to know where they live. I need to know. I don't mean physically where they live, but I need to know how to find them and how to access them. What are the paths and the channels to them? And that person will know that audience.
And even know some of the problems that the audience already has.
Absolutely, because I want to ask questions of that audience. But I need to know what questions to ask. I don't want to end up going down a rabbit hole. And then the fifth bucket is really sort of important too, although it's sort of slightly different. This is more around the math and the money. I'm a big fan, by the way, of early stage. If you can't necessarily hire it at the beginning, then rather than going for a co-founder, which is the cheap option, I like the virtual option. I like the fact that you can potentially tap into a virtual CTO or a virtual CFO or a virtual head of sales or a virtual head of marketing, okay? Because if we've got those 4 or 5 roles as our primary advisory team, which may then become an advisory board,
yes,
and I need a person in the primary roles of each of those when I build my first 5 team operators, you might call them my executive suite or my C-suite, whatever you want to call them. They may not be chief CTO or chief marketing officer or what have you, but they might be head of sales, head of marketing, head of operations, head of finance, etc., etc. Or they might just be contractors. Okay. That's fine. But the first 5 people I'm going to need in any venture are going to be those 5 roles. So why not start with the 5 advisors who will know people
in those roles
that they can then introduce me to.
Okay.
That's going to save me a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money, lot of cost.
Yeah, go to recruitment and hope for the best, right? Yeah. And pay for that big time.
My hit rate on finding talent on introductions is over 95%.
Yeah, and it's no surprise because an introduction isn't given lightly, especially when someone's looking to employ.
Yeah.
And you do tread carefully if someone asks for a recommendation. You think, should I be giving that? And if they are great, then you're happy to yell from the hills, yes, they're a great person that takes a role. So
indeed. Yeah. And we talked a little earlier about the fact that the relationship building 101 is how do you know whether somebody's emotionally invested in your success? Well, if they're prepared to give a recommendation of someone to you, they're putting their professional reputation on the line for that. So it demonstrates that they may well, in fact, be becoming emotionally invested in your success. Call it a litmus test, if you will. Okay. You stick the paper in the water, does it come out pink or does it come out blue? Yeah. If they stick the paper in the water, it doesn't matter whether the paper comes out pink or blue. The litmus test is proved. It's either acidic or alkaline. It's one of the two. So, but you at least know where they're in.
Yeah, get it. Okay.
And then after meeting with the first person, if they're the right person, great. But typically, what you'd be looking for there is 2 or 3 introductions for each role, and now you're not having to figure out what should I be asking this person, because I think there's almost missed this. That was the biggie. The advisors are not only going to know the people that you need to be introduced to, but they're going to be able to help you to understand what questions to ask that person. So I've got a great B2B enterprise marketing, sales, marketing background and business building. And I'm pretty good on the finance stuff too. But if I was looking for a technical advisor in certain areas, there might be an industry where I don't know much about that area. So what do I ask the person around the service delivery element, the technical advisor? What sort of criterion should I be looking for in a technical person that I'd want to hire? The advisor should be telling me that. They should be saying, well, you're looking for these sorts of background and these sorts of skills and these sorts of criteria.
One of the biggest challenges that a non-tech has, or in any case you walk into a business, just from a technical perspective, it could be any of the other ones too, right? They don't know finances, they don't know what to ask either. But from a technical perspective, they don't know what they don't know. They don't know how to employ the right team. Are they building the right technology? Are they approaching it in the right frame of reference? Are they building it scalable? How are they going to deploy this? How are they going to maintain it? They don't even understand these questions. So that advisor will guide you through that maze, really, because it is a maze.
It is a maze. Yeah. But then there's another layer overarching over the top of this, where you as a business founder, not only are you not now looking for co-founders, but you're looking for effectively your first employees for the business, as well as your advisors. But you're also getting to set the culture of the business, because you're now not hiring people based on skills. You're able to hire people and select people based on alignment and cultural fit, not with the culture that you have, but the culture you're imagining. Because if it's just you,
there's not much culture.
There's not much culture there, but there is your vision, and there is your values, there is your attitudes and your ethics and your morality that all play here that form culture. Okay, so you can hire for elements of that and design and create the culture, therefore, that you want to create, as opposed to just recruiting people and then ending up with what you end up with.
Oh, that's a good point. Creating culture, because you are creating it based on some of your values and your customers' values too, because you're creating it to serve the purpose. So I think it's something that people have to think about when you're creating a business and an idea. Culture is one of them. They don't just rock up.
Exactly. But now, so if you've got the fund, if in your strategic roadmap you've got the capacity now to fund those first 5 people, and you've found a way to recognise the value that your advisors are delivering and reward them in whatever way, shape or form you've agreed there.
Yep.
I like advisory boards because you can give them a clip of the ticket,
Okay.
but you've probably worked with them for a little while before you've offered them any equity, so they've also figured out that, hey, this thing actually could be worth something, so there is value in the equity, and you're not nickel and diming them by offering them equity instead of paying them.
Get it.
Some advisors you should pay, some you give them the choice.
What's an example of that?
Oh, well, for instance, so I've got a wonderful advisory board. My chairman, I'll mention Neville Christie.
Yep.
Neville and I have known each other for, what am I, 53, 37 years?
Okay, a fair whack there.
Yeah, fair whack. And Neville has been chairman of Startup Foundation for a couple of years, but he had some ill health a couple of years ago, stepped away.
Okay, not good to hear.
So rather than recognise equity in a project, Neville, by the way, is 78 years young. He's had 44 successful ventures and 41 exits.
Yes.
44 ventures, 41 successes, and 3 abject failures, as he calls them.
Well, that's a great strike record compared to what the market will tell you.
Indeed. Yeah. But for Neville, we recognise. Look, you got to be honest. Neville's 78. If we take 20 years to build success in this venture within Startup Foundation, is that it would be unreasonable of me to expect him to take equity.
Understand that.
To forego some current value for some future value.
Which he may not see.
Indeed.
Makes sense.
Neville's got a better use for the cash now, so my arrangement with him is different to the other members of my board.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. What is the position of the mentor and where are they currently at?
Yeah.
And what do they want? And ask the question.
And if that's right, if you've got a relationship with them, with the point where you're able to talk about these things, then ask them, what do they want? You know, what's in it for you? I've had a couple of advisors who said to me, actually, Dan, happy to just work with you because I love what you're doing. Might be something in it for me later, but for now, I'm just happy to work with you because I think you're on the right track and I want to see where this goes.
Yeah, no, everyone's different, right? And an advisor may be a quick chat and a coffee once a month, whatever, how you approach it. How do you recommend working with these advisors or mentors? How do you bring them on, and what are the expectations that you put upon them to deliver to the business and the product moving forward?
Well, you raised the question, so it depends on your relationship with them and how you work with them. So I probably had 100 in my professional 35-year career, professional career.
Okay.
Probably had over 100 really good business mentors. And some of them I see, a couple of them I caught up with recently who I haven't seen for 20 years, 3 of them specifically.
Yep.
Relationships still as strong as ever with them, wonderful. But I don't sit down with them for a monthly strategic planning session.
Okay.
But, you know, they're still interested in how I'm going. They want to know what's going on. They want to know what progress I've had. You know, that younger version of me that had those big dreams and goals and how did that go? And, you know, and sometimes that was a good story and sometimes it was a bad. But they still are always interested in the story. Mentors are always going to be mentors. You're never going to lose them. So then there are your mentoring advisors. And so this is the ones that you're seeing on a more regular basis. They're emotionally invested in your success, and they're challenging you. So I like the fact that some of my mentors are very, very challenging because they'll ask me really, really hard questions that I maybe don't want to ask. You know.
Yeah, don't want to look at it at this point, right?
It's the wince factor, you know. It's like they ask a question and you go, "Oh, I was hoping you weren't going to go there," but you know through. But the value of those relationships also too over time does improve because, for instance, Neville and I have a wonderful relationship. In fact, I think we're actually about to start recording a podcast series together shortly. So love to
definitely share and cross pollinate.
I think we might get you on as a guest of our show so that we can share Neville. But one of the things that I have is that, you know, I'll have my sit down session with Neville on a monthly basis, and I know that there is a series of questions he's going to ask me.
Okay.
So now I'm in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about how am I going to respond to that in advance? How am I going to prepare for that? And when I'm in meetings, it's what would Neville say about this, and how would Neville respond, and how would he frame this question? Yes. So I'm now anticipating my relationship with him, not second guessing it, but I'm now to the point where I'm internalising his insights and his learning, so that I can then step perhaps outside myself and maybe provide his perspective, or at least a vicarious version of
get
his
it.
perspective.
Yeah, no, I understand that. So he's can be a 24/7 mentor that you can lean on even when he's not around.
Exactly, because our relationship is good enough to the point where I
Yeah.
can ask the question, what would Neville do? What would
Yep.
Neville say?
Mm-hmm.
And even if I can't see the answer, I can come at it from another perspective, which is often hard to do.
It's challenging because we all get stuck in our own thoughts, own patterns, own beliefs about certain situations, and generally that's just blinkers on, right? And it's not easy to step out of that sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I think I've worked out there are actually about 7 different types of mentors and advisors.
Okay.
So there are the ideators. There are the people that you just sit down in a blue sky meeting with and fill a whiteboard in half an hour.
The creative.
Well, they're
Yeah.
oh no, I wouldn't say they're the creative. They're
Okay.
the ideators. They're people
Okay.
that are a bit like me.
Yes.
They live in their head.
Yep.
And they almost think four-dimensionally.
But I wouldn't call them creative from an output drawing perspective.
Yes.
It's still creative from a mind perspective,
yes.
problem-solving perspective. That's
It
what
is.
I'll call
It is.
creative. Yeah.
And what I mentioned before with Neville as a challenger, and
Yep.
the challengers are very important because they're all the people who say yes, but.
But, yeah.
I hate that because you know it's coming, and and the moment the words leave your mouth and you say it, and then they go yes, but. Oh shoot! And now I've got to, and that's a really, really good thing because even as much as, and I have a great friend of mine, I'll mention his name, Zvonko. Zvonko is one of my great challengers as well. The guy is I was going to say as crazy as a loon. He's as clever as a loon. He's not crazy at all. He is really, really smart, and he's got a lot of insight and perspective. He is a very, very detailed planner, project manager,
Okay.
very, very skilled at it, very professional. And so when I lay out my grand vision, and he'll always challenge me with the yes, but.
Okay.
And the reason why that's hard is you don't necessarily want to have those conversations, but they're the conversations you need to have.
Yes.
They're most important. So, I mean, I could prattle off a list of the other types, but I think in reality, there are different types of advisors that suit different circumstances and different needs, as well as different roles. So the roles that we talked about, the 5 roles that we talked about before, I mean, they're key, but you'll find that different advisors will have different different cultural and emotional strengths that will, as a founder, you need to encompass all of them. You need to take a wider view.
As a founder, you need to put those hats on. You need to swap hats sometimes, and you can't just do the same thing and be the one-trick pony, as they say.
Yeah, that's right. And you've got to be very good at changing hats.
You do.
So getting that different guidance from different perspectives. No one mentor advisor is right for you, but as a suite, as a portfolio, as a board of them, they become very, very valuable. They become your source of perspective and insight and reason. One of the things I never do with my advisory board is I think we talk about the question of ethics. I don't think we ever talk about the question of integrity though. Okay. If they're in my advisory board or on my board, then they already passed the ethical question long ago.
Okay.
I would never work with somebody who's an advisor who I had concerns around their integrity or around their ethics.
Yeah, and that's not who you want to be associating yourself with, especially trying to build a good business, good brand. The last thing you need is someone that could bring that down to and give you the wrong advice too, and then you don't want to be questioning that when you're too far down the train. So work that out early on.
Yeah, and the reason I raise that is because one of the things that founders don't do a lot of is they don't, and typically, especially when they're seeking investment, is they're not familiar with the term due diligence. And due diligence is taking a pragmatic approach to testing the veracity or validity of the information that you're being given by another source. An investor, you say to an investor, I think my business is worth $10 million, but it's still an idea and you have no product. Well, it'll take their due diligence just finished right there. But you may say, well, my business is based upon, my business is worth $3 million based upon $3 million of last year's sales. Great, okay, can I see the books? That's due diligence. And so when you're meeting with a mentor advisor, you are quite within your rights. In fact, it would be expected for you to do a level of due diligence on that person. Okay. So, for instance, if you're talking with a particular advisor and let's say they're a specialist in law or accounting or business structural planning, not unreasonable for you want to ask them to say, can you give me the name of a couple of clients that you've worked with recently whose scenarios are similar to mine, whom you've given advice that they've benefited from.
Get it.
Okay. Why wouldn't you do the same with an advisor?
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't you ask the same question? Can you give me the contact details?
Mm-hmm.
Would you mind giving me the contact details of someone you've worked with similar to me, solving not necessarily the same problem, but at least works a little bit like I do, that you've been able to add some value with?
Yep.
And do your due diligence that way?
With all doing business, everyone asks, are you capable? Show us what you've done in the past.
Yeah.
And that question's asked all the time, so why not in that scenario?
I don't think it's a bad thing. And you're basically, because if somebody struggles to be able to say, well, they may be upfront. Look, I haven't worked in your space before with advising anyone that's doing what you're doing. But here's a couple of people I've worked with recently that are doing X, Y, and Z that have comparable enough. I can live with that.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, or if they're a first time out, look, I've just hung out my shingle. I don't have any clients. I haven't. But here's 2 or 3 people I work with at my last company. That's fine. But everybody has a level of due diligence.
Okay.
You know, the other thing you can do with due diligence is I always ask permission. Look, by the way, do you mind if I contact a couple of people that we know in common? I'll look up on LinkedIn if I know that person, and there's 8 or 10 people on there, 2 or 3 I might really trust. I'll ring them and say, listen, tell me what you think of Zvonko, or tell me what you think of Neville, and you know, I'll get the truth. And I think that's a really good thing. I know, for instance, Neville is very polarizing. He is a very, very strong individual. He's very intelligent. He's very successful, and he has, in any successful business career, you cannot not go through life and rub some people up the wrong way.
Yeah, it's challenging, isn't it?
It is.
You need to stand your ground and own what you're doing, and some people aren't going to agree.
Exactly.
And if you don't do that, you're not going to get anywhere because you're going to flutter in the wind.
Exactly.
You can't do it, and you learn that as you go through.
You do, but what that means is then that if I was doing due diligence on Neville, I'm sure I would come across some people that would say, well, don't like Neville. Why? Now, the thing about it is, but they know Neville, so he's not milquetoast, he's not bland, he's memorable enough, and he's been able to hold a position. And whilst that other person whom I also like and trust may not agree with that, at least I know I'm prepared for that. I'm an adult, I'm a grown up. I know that Neville's an adult, a grown up, and I know that he's not trying to win some sort of popularity contest,
which is probably a good thing to know anyway.
It is. It is. So because part of my due diligence is I just want to know the good stuff. I also want to know some of the bad stuff.
Yep.
There are people that would say about me that I have this characteristic, or I have that quality or characteristic. That should not be a surprise to anyone that asks, that calls up about me and asks for a referral.
Yeah.
That would not be a surprise. In fact, if somebody said something that was a surprise, I would be, okay, where's that coming from? In the same way that I know what people would say about Neville, because not only do I know Neville's great stuff, but I also know his, we've had those very challenging conversations where he's told me, straight out, okay, let's make it simple. Your idea sucks. Your baby is ugly. Nobody wants to be told their baby is ugly.
You don't want to be told that, but sometimes you need to be told.
Sometimes you need to be told, that's right. And we all need to be told that. So I love my relationship with Neville because he can tell me that my baby is ugly.
Okay.
Now my babies aren't. My babies are beautiful. They're all grown up now, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get back to we're looking for a mentor. Maybe that's the place we start. They may be a broad person or a particular area. Then we've got 5 particular areas that we want to start build some advisory around. That's the tech, that's the industry insider, someone that knows a bit about the industry. It's someone that can actually acquire customers and knows how to acquire customers, probably in that space.
Or at least in the method. Yeah. I mean, they don't necessarily have to understand the space, but if it's a digital play, they should be a digital guy. If they're a B2B sales guy or an enterprise sales model, they should understand that methodology.
Yes.
Because, I mean, let's be honest, if you're going to sell $20 million worth of products and you're going to need, let's say 5 salespeople to do that, so $4 million budget each, then that's a sales team. So you're going to want somebody who understands how to build a sales team of 4 or 5 salespeople doing enterprise sales.
And then, that makes perfect sense. So then you've got the audience, someone who knows the audience and actually understands the customer. Yeah. And finally, money. Someone knows a little bit about money and can do that. Now, there's an interesting point here that I've stumbled across during this conversation. And I think you alluded to it at the start. Do I bring on a tech founder?
Yeah.
Now, you've raised 5 areas here that are important. One of them is potentially tech, and that's the delivery. I ask the question to the founders out there: am I going to bring on an industry insider founder? Am I going to bring on someone that acquires a founder, a sales guy? Am I going to bring on an audience or a market person as a founder as well? And then plus I'll throw a money guy in too. So I've got 6 founders now in my business. So I think we pigeonhole, or when you're building tech, you pigeonhole it, it's all about the tech. And clearly business is not just about the piece and the service delivery and the technology, it's all these other facets too. So I think I always want to raise that because I hear that all the time. I hear talking to founders, we're looking for a tech founder.
Yeah.
Are you looking for another founder?
Let me give 2 words to be just absolute to your audience. Let me be more. I can't be any more direct than this. Stop it. Just stop it. You do not need a co-founder if you don't want one. Now, if you feel like you don't want to go on this journey alone, then that's okay.
Yeah.
But what I'm talking about is building a team. Now, the reason why a lot of it, I won't throw shade on any one particular group, but often it's said at a lot of accelerators that you need. In order to get into an accelerator program, you need co-founders. We must have co-founders, and that's more about their business methodology and needing to have clarity around the structure, and needing those to be in place before you get into it. If you're talking about inviting people into play as your head of sales or head of operations or tech or marketing or head of finance or what have you, then those people are effectively your early hires. They're your C-suite, but they're your first hires. They may have an equity earn-in or an equity buy-in component. They may ultimately become recognised as co-founders of the business, what have you, but you're not looking for co-founders. And I'll tell you why. Because if you've got 5 advisors and you've got 5 early hires, plus yourself and 2 or 3 service providers and what have you, now you've got a team of 10 or 11 or 12 people. That means that if you've been able to sustain that team for any length of time, you are eminently more investable. Now, what is the main claim that everybody says the investor is looking for? Investors invest in the team. I'm not sure it's true. I invest in people. But because the person finds the advisors, the person executes on the strategic plan, the person creates the strategic plan, the person builds the team, and so I invest in the person because I'm investing in the person who demonstrates that they've got the capacity to execute on their strategic plan, on the capacity to build relationships, on the capacity to engage with audiences, on the capacity to evangelize a message, and the capacity to get people to emotionally buy in as well as financially buy in to a product. So I invest in people. But to most other investors who say they invest in teams, then what you're able to demonstrate and differentiate from every other startup that's out there talking to investors is, I've got a team of 10.
And doesn't mean they're full-time.
It doesn't mean they're full-time.
Lean on these people.
I've got a team of 10 people who are emotionally and financially invested in the success of this venture. Some of them might be putting in 2 days a week. Some of them might be putting in 3 hours a month, depending on what the nature of it as the advisor. But I have a team of 10. So as an investor, I would look at that team of 10 or 11 people and suddenly go, okay, now I know where that person is getting their advice in. I probably know a couple of the advisors. I probably have a relationship with them and trust a couple of them. So as an introduction, think about it for a second. Let's follow the rabbit hole. I've got a team of, remember at the beginning of the conversation I said that every resource that you need isn't necessarily known to you, but is known to you by the people that you know?
Yes.
I now have a team of 10 people.
Maybe introducing you to your investors potentially.
So suddenly I'm looking for an investor. I've got 5 people who are probably already now on my cap table after the first 6 or 12 months. Certainly they're on my cap table by 12 months. They're now the second investors in my business. Why are they the second investors? Well, who's the first investor in your business? You are.
You are, yes.
The founder is. So if you've got your first investor and you've already got your second investors, every other investor after your first investor is a follow-on investor.
Okay, so you consider the investor's a bit more secure then, right?
So now the investor is not first money in. He might be second or third money in. You being the founder, you're the first money in. Your advisory board is now your second money in. So now the opportunity for your advisors to introduce you to aligned investors who understand or are likely to understand your vision and likely to be interested in your space Remember saying before I get a 95% hit rate on introductions for referrals?
Yeah.
What do you think your hit rate would be on the introductions for potential investors? Certainly going to be a lot better than the 5% success rate that we get out in the industry.
And it's important to them. Your advisors, it's an investment to them. If they believe in the product, they're there supporting, helping grow this thing. They're going to want to get the right investor in too.
Well, of course they are. They're not going to want to bring the wrong investor in. That's the first thing. And if they've got a slice of the pie, they're going to want to protect their investment. They're not going to want to bring in somebody who is combative or alienating or wants to take over and run the show or is some sort of prima donna. They're only going to introduce people that are aligned. Now, this is not about groupthink, by the way. This is about cultural alignment, and it's really, really key. So by you setting the culture and defining that within the group, you're now able to ask your team members and advisors to introduce you to people that are culturally aligned and mission aligned, and that can add some strategic value.
Yeah, huge.
That also adds value to the credibility of your advisors professionally, because they're now able to leverage you as a product as part of their portfolio.
No, very good.
So the relationship, if done properly, is symbiotic.
Oh, the advisors get a win out of it. The project works. They've been a part of that team too. So yeah, I get that point of it as well, because they want to advise on more things too. It's not just, it can be something that they do as an occupation. Advisory and mentoring can be an occupation.
Indeed. Yeah. And I think one of the things I want to come back to, and I haven't touched on, but I think it's really important to say, is that with your advisors, you've got to pay them in the way that they need to be paid. And so for some of them, they might have had a successful career, they're former, maybe retired CEOs or what have you, or they've been journeyman consultants for all their life. So they're professional, they're perhaps no longer needing to work, maybe they're former CEOs or what have you. They've made their money, and so they do it because they enjoy it. Okay. And for other people, this is the way that they get paid and make their daily living. So they may need a recognition of a fee for service. And that's fine. I mean, you might have somebody who is an action coach or a skills coach or a product coach or a technical coach or something like that. They're a coach. It's not the same thing necessarily as an advisor. So I think when you're talking to people, you've got to get an understanding of the value that they can deliver it, and what do they need in return, and how do they want to be recognised and rewarded. And you should ask that early on.
You need to, otherwise you walk into a relationship, you don't know what the end game is, and no one's going to sign up to that.
That's it. And this concept of informal advisory boards, which are not the same as shadow directors or shadow boards, by the way, but they are essentially people that have all care, but they don't have the governance requirements that a formal board has. They are informal advisors, and the decision still rests with you as a founder. This is why I like the concept of having solo founders with good advisory boards and good early stage team members of a C-suite, because you're not having to you can delegate decision making processes. You're not having to share the decision making processes. But as an investor, I like those businesses to invest in, because I know that founder is not in a gaggle of 2 or 3 co-founders trying to figure out between them what we think sounds best.
I know fight around what works, right?
That's right. I know that single founder, who is the decision maker, is getting a series of different advices from different advisors, some of whom I know, and then is making the decision and he's acting. So he's not in a committee. It's not management by committee.
And it can be challenging when you're in that world. So I've got a co-founder, and we log heads sometimes, but I think where the advantage is, I found a co-founder and we think very differently, and we bring different facets to the table. But I've also run into businesses that have the same thinking co-founders, and they really get no benefit from it. So if you're going to have a co-founder, they need to bring something different to the table than you do. Otherwise, there's no point having a co-founder, like you said.
That's right. If what was it? Neville said something really clever, and I'll see if I can quote this correctly. If we always both agree, then one of us is not required. Your co-founder
to the table, right?
Your co-founder challenge. If you have a co-founder or co-founders, they should actually be challenging relationships, because if you always agree, then why do you need them, or why do they need you?
100% agree with that. So That's a really, really point. I really like that. If you always agree, yeah, or you need each other.
That's it. I think that's why great couples work. That when people are different, opposites attract, and all of that. So and the same is true in a business relationship. If you think about it, if you're going to get into business with a co-founder of some description, I know that we started talking about technical resources, but the conversation around a co-founder is really important. If you're going to get into a relationship with a co-founder, and you're going to be in business with that person for 10 or 20 years, in the same way that you would do due diligence on an investor, you would want to do the due diligence on a potential co-founder. And if they're just someone that you met because they went to the same university as you, or that you met them at a meetup or whatever like that, then what level of due diligence are you actually going to be able to do if that person doesn't have, excuse me, hiccup, like you, doesn't have a business track record. So I'd like to think that you can be comfortably a solo founder and build a framework or a structure that makes you investable and is able to demonstrate not to accelerator programs that you've got 3 co-founders, but to great investment groups, whether that be VCs or venture studios or corporate investment capitals or angel groups or what have you, that you are in fact investable because you've been able to demonstrate by your actions and your behaviours the outcomes that make you investable.
No, it makes perfect sense, and really appreciate the conversation around looking at building mentors and advisory first. And based on this conversation, I'm assuming that happens from a strategic plan, which if you go back in the podcast, you'll find that that we talked about earlier, build a strategic plan, start looking at building the team, then getting the advisors on board. Don't go and build the technical product. Get the right people, the right minds, so you actually solve the right problems for the customer. It all is all about that anyway.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to have a further conversation around what I think is the right way to build a technical product, because I think there is one.
Oh, okay. We have a chat. I think I know how to build one too, but that's okay.
Exactly. I'd love to. In fact, you know what? I actually think maybe that's what we'll get you on talking about. And then we can banter about what are the ways that you could build a great product within the frameworks that we talked about now.
Love to.
Because I think it's a whole can of worms, but there are so many opportunities in Australia. Can I just table something sort of finally that I wanted to just really put in front of your audience? Australia's not really good at innovation. Now, we say we are, but they trot out the old stump jump plough and Wi-Fi and Hills Hoist as being great examples of Australian innovation. Let's be honest, we suck at it. They are terrible examples. I can give you chapter and verse, historical reasons why every one of those inventions was a bad example of innovation. If we were really good at innovation, we would have 100 of those have come out in the last 5 years.
Yeah, what's coming out?
There are a couple of organisations that are supposedly worth more than $1 billion, based upon not market tested, not validated. There's a couple of really good ones that have been sold that are validated that are worth a couple of $1 billion, sure. But as a general rule, we suck at innovation. But here's the thing. We're a really, really large group of smart people. Don't let anyone tell you Australia is a small market. It's not. 25 million people. We are the most homogeneously, culturally diverse country in the planet. We are very, very highly trained. Australians are very well skilled. We're very professional in what we do. We have very high work standards, very high ethics. Mostly, a couple of trade services where you might disagree, but air conditioning sales, air conditioning guy up on the roof before. No, but as a general rule, internationally we're respected. Around the world, we have very, very high standards of regulatory compliance, governance standards, those sorts of things. And Australians are well liked.
Yes.
And in Australia, you can build a product and test it with an audience or market of 25 million people that you can sell just about any other market or industry or audience in the world. Australia is the best place to test and build and launch an offering for any market. And I challenge anyone to tell me a market that you couldn't launch a business in Australia and make money in and then scale to the rest of the world. Now, it doesn't mean we have to, but we can.
It is the opportunity. We have a good testing ground. There's enough numbers there. There's enough diversity there to test the concepts, right?
That's right. Yeah. So we're on the crest of a wave. It hasn't happened for us yet, but I reckon the last 5 years has really been about setting the landscape. The governance, compliance. I talk about the 5 factors: the picks and shovels, the tools, the resources. The regulatory environment is 4th, and the capital is 5th. Now, the capital has been building in Australia, and there is more capital than was available 5 years ago.
That's positive.
Okay, but the returns haven't happened, and for investors to continue to reinvest in products, they need to get a return, and they haven't seen it yet. So we've got, I reckon, about 5 years in Australia to build a really brilliant innovation system, and those that get it right are going to go on to huge things, or in the next 5 years, we as a nation will fall off the back of the wave, to use the surfing analogy. We're on the crest of a wave right now. The wave is building. We're either going to fall off the back, and then we're done, or we're going to ride it all the way to the beach. Now, I personally think that it's the latter, not the former. Okay. I think we are in the land of opportunity right now. We're at a sweet spot.
Yeah, no, it's great to hear for everyone out there that's in this current position, but take it 3 steps back, build your advisory board first, build your team, and do it the right way. Don't go looking for 3 or 4 co-founders and hoping for the best.
Exactly. Yeah. So to summarise that and to tie in with exactly what you've said, is if you've got together a framework and a strategic planning methodology, and you figured out how to build a team and a team roadmap and what have you, and become investable, and your advisors, and they say, look, brilliant, Dan, love your work, but this baby is ugly. But the next one, your advisors still like you.
They still exist.
They still exist. You kept your powder dry. You didn't go too early. You didn't launch a product that nobody wanted. You didn't spend 2 years or waste and chew through all the valuable seed capital you've got. You've kept your powder dry for the right thing. And this is what I think about, is that, did we say this episode or the previous episode, this ideas are like buses, there'll be another along in 5 minutes? Yeah. That's true in this space.
Yes.
So don't feel like you've got to rush and be the first to market. Most of the successful ventures in the world, almost none of them were first mover advantage. Almost none. Coca-Cola was not the first soft drink. Realestate.com was not the first real estate platform. Facebook was not the social media platform. Microsoft was not the first people to release a spreadsheet.
Correct.
WhatsApp was not the first mobile telecommunications
Google
app.
was not the first search engine.
Google was not the first search engine. Everybody had... there are almost no great companies around still in existence today that had first mover advantage.
Yeah, that's another great point for everyone out there. Don't rush it. There's no need to rush. And I think sometimes as a founder with an idea, you think, oh, God, I have to move quickly. And that might be the key pivotal mistake, where I jump in, I hire a dev team quickly, and I start building something because I'm in a rush for some reason. That's all in your head. Don't be consumed by time. Make sure you're building the right thing, get the right team around you. And then you never know. You might not even build that product, like you said.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Being patiently impatient is one of the best characteristics that you can have. Pausing, taking time to reflect, thinking it through, asking lots of questions. We use the analogy of painting at the beginning of the thing. Don't be the first. Don't go out there and throw your ladder up against the wall and get the job painting done, only to realise that, hey, nobody's going to pay me for this work.
Correct. Thanks, Dan. I think that's been a lot of insight there for our listeners, and plenty to take away and just think about. If you are in the middle of building a product and you haven't got a team around you, go back to the steps, start building your advisory board now, get it right, get some mentors around you, and make sure you're doing it the right way. If you've got the gaps that you want to fill, make sure you can bring people in those areas. I'll cover them again. The tech space, industry insiders, someone that knows the industry and understands it, the people who can help you gain and acquire customers, the people who know the audience, that actually know your customer, their pains, their problems, and know them inside out, and also people that know money and finance. They're the 5 areas you want to cover off. If you don't have them covered off now, make sure you go out and do that. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate your time. Thanks for coming in again, and I'm sure we'll have you again at some point.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun, and I learned some things too. So thanks very much. Hope your audience gets a bit out of this too.
Cheers, Dan. Thanks again.
Thanks.